The Biden administration and EPA are proposing new regulations for coal and gas-fired power plants. Now, this would be the first time that the U.S. has restricted carbon dioxide emissions from existing plants. The EPA says that by 2030, the new regulations would annually prevent roughly 1,300 premature deaths. They could also prevent more than 800 hospital and ER visits and 300,000 asthma attacks. Joining us now, CBS News senior national and environmental correspondent Ben Tracy. So, Ben, talk to us about how stringent these new regulations are.
These are very stringent. I mean, basically existing gas and coal-fired power plants would have to cut their greenhouse gas emissions, those are the emissions that are warming the planet, by about 90% by 2040. So that leaves them with really just a couple of choices of how they comply with this. They can shut down the power plant altogether. They can switch to a cleaner form of energy like hydrogen, or they would have to install, and this is what most plants would end up doing, expensive carbon capture technology that basically sits on top of the smokestack. It captures that carbon before it can go into the atmosphere, and then that carbon is safely stored in tanks or underground. The problem with that, the industry says, is one, it costs a lot of money, and two, it's basically non-existent technology in the U.S. right now. There isn't a power plant anywhere in this country right now that is operating that way. So this would be a major overhaul of the power sector in the U.S. in pretty quick fashion.
Well, given some of those criticisms, I guess, Ben, tell us how essential this puzzle piece is in fitting into the Biden administration's bigger picture climate goals.
Yeah, this is a big part of their climate goals. The president has said that he wants the power sector in the U.S., the power grid in the U.S., to be net zero emissions by 2035. The EPA says if this is implemented, that we'll get there by about 2040. So this is a big part of it. The EPA also says that this would cut 617 metric tons of planet warming emissions, and that's equal to about half of all the cars on the road in the country right now. So this is a big swing at the climate problem from their standpoint. The real question is, can this be done on this time frame, and what kind of pushback you'll get from industry and also lawmakers?
Well, speaking of pushback, I want to ask you about one component of it. Last year, the Supreme Court limited the EPA's ability to mandate carbon emissions. Is there a chance that this plan doesn't hold up in court?
Yeah, there's at least a very big chance this will be challenged in court, whether it gets whether it's held up or not. No one can really predict what the Supreme Court would do. But as you mentioned, last year they did go after those Obama-era power plant mandates, and those were struck down. So on a phone call with the EPA head and reporters, he was asked, are you taking that into account here? And they say that they did design these proposed rules with court challenges in mind. So we'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But certainly there will be court challenges. There will be lawsuits from Republican-led states as well.
Well, when we start talking about politics, I have to ask you, of course, about Senator Joe Manchin. I know that he says he'll block any EPA nominees over the proposal. Might the Biden administration make compromises in order to get his support?
So a little context there. We should say Senator Joe Manchin, obviously a Democrat, so he is against this plan of the White House, even though he's technically on their team. But Senator Manchin is from West Virginia. It's a big coal-producing state. He also has personal financial ties to the coal industry, so it is not altogether surprising that he would come out against this. But he is basically now at war with the Biden administration over what he calls their radical climate agenda. So he's going to do everything he can to try to derail this, and you can count on West Virginia probably being one of those states that is going to challenge this in court.
All right, Ben Tracy, thank you.